Tina Watson was a 26-year-old newlywed on her honeymoon with her husband, Gabe Watson. They decided to spend that time scuba diving in Australia. 2 minutes into her descent into the water to explore the sunken ship, the SS Yongala, she lost consciousness and sadly passed away after being brought up back to the surface. At first glance, this just seemed like an unfortunate accident. However, as the investigation continued, detectives couldn't help but notice something was a little off about the incident. Before the couple wed, Tina began to take diving lessons to prepare for an adventurous honeymoon, and Gabe was already a semi-experienced diver. They both were excited for the trip, to do something adventurous and just be together during a once-in-a-lifetime experience. However, with Gabe having limited experience and Tina never having gone in open oceans, along with her diagnosis of PVST, which can occur suddenly, both had to be extremely careful when the time came to go underwater. The couple finally left for their honeymoon 2 days after their wedding and flew to Sydney for some sightseeing and exploring for a few days before the dive in the Great Barrier Reef. On October 22, 2003, Gabe and Tina left their hotel and began their journey out to open waters. They boarded a small vessel called the Spoilsport that was to transport them to the site of the wreckage. Prior to this, they were offered a guided dive with someone experienced, in which they would be led by this person to ensure their safety, yet also acting as a tour guide. This offer was refused by the both of them as they wanted to go down and explore on their own. At 10 a.m., they were suited up and ready to take the plunge. A few moments went by and the couple returned to the Spoilsport. Gabe said there were issues with his equipment, more specifically his dive computer, which was worn on his wrist. A dive computer basically tells you how much oxygen you have left, along with some statistics that help monitor your dive, such as depth and time. It's basically a tool that helps you dive safely. They got back on this small motor vessel once Gabe got everything figured out with his equipment and went back into the water along with the other members of their group. How this dive worked was that there was an anchor line that leads you from one part of the wreck, at which point you would drift alongside the ship, pick up a second line at the other end, where your dive would be completed. You would then begin ascending up to the surface to get back on the small vessel. At this point, the couple descended down to the wreck site. However, moments later, Gabe resurfaced again, and this time he was needing help. Tina was struggling underwater and needed to be rescued. Gabe and another crew member of that boat brought Tina back up to the surface and began CPR, and for 45 minutes tried to bring her back to life. However, it was too late. Tina was gone. Authorities were then brought to the scene, and what looked like a tragic accident became a murder investigation rather quickly after speaking to Gabe Watson. It turned out that the others who were on that boat had some sort of scuba diving experience, and they knew exactly what they were doing to ensure their own safety. On this day, the dive became a rud dive due to the fact that there were strong currents underwater and only meant for experienced divers, which both Tina and Gabe really weren't. Police questioned Gabe as to why they were down there in the first place when he knew both he and Tina weren't fit to dive, and why he refused the opportunity for a guided dive and orientations. Gabe explained that they were hit with a current right as they entered the water and were constantly moving. Tina gave Gabe the signal that she wanted to go back up to the first anchor as she couldn't continue. He signaled to her to put air in her buoyancy compensatory in order for her to float back up effortlessly, which failed. Gabe rushed over to her to drag her back up to the surface, at which point he said Tina knocked off the mask from his face, which made him let her go in order for him to fix it. Tina would sink further down, which is when Gabe resurfaced and asked for help. It wasn't until after the initial questioning of witnesses and photographs being developed that the police became more and more suspicious of Gabe. One witness account stated that they saw Gabe giving Tina a bear hug, in which his arms would be wrapped around her. Suspicion arose around that, and people thought that he was turning off her oxygen tank, waited for her to lose consciousness, and turned it back on. Police compared Gabe's account with the data that was recorded on his watch and found numerous inconsistencies. According to witnesses, he made little to no attempt to saving his wife. He was her designated dive buddy and was responsible for her. He didn't try to remove the equipment off of her, nor did he share his alternative oxygen source, which he specially requested. He basically just let her drown. Tests solidified the fact that none of Tina's equipment was faulty or broken. Had Gabe made all the necessary actions in even trying to save his wife, she probably would still be alive. Her autopsy revealed that she died from drowning and an air embolism was found in her body. So now the question is, why would a man let his new wife, the woman he loved, die on their honeymoon? Main theory: money. Gabe requested that he be made the sole beneficiary and increased her life insurance policy prior to the fateful trip. He was charged with murder in Australia and he pled guilty to manslaughter. He was deported back to the United States, where he was arrested and charged with murder the second he arrived. The prosecution then eventually had to prove that there was an intent to kill her and how it happened. To prove this, they entered a photo into evidence which showed him looking into the camera as Tina lay in the background, motionless. The defense argued that Gabe loved his wife and had no part to play in her death. They stated that Gabe received no money and the incident was nothing more than a tragic accident. With all this, nothing was as shocking as what came after her death. Tina's parents complained to the police that the flowers and gifts that were being left on her grave were being vandalized and removed. Even after taking the matter into their own hands and locking up these gifts, the vandalism continued to happen. Police set up a hidden camera to record the gravesite to find out what was actually happening. It revealed that Gabe Watson, the man who claimed to have loved Tina, was using bolt cutters to cut and remove the gifts from her grave and throwing it in a nearby trash can. On February 23, 2012, Gabe Watson was acquitted of murder and has since remarried. My ass has started to hurt again.
Starting route to Thorswell. For 22 miles, continue straight.
Well, fuck.
One eternity later.
No pun intended.